if you have a crazy amount of anxiety that's stressing you out, you can't sleep, you're worried about your partner, or your work, or your money or whatever, this video is for you. I'm going to walk you through some of the things that I did that dramatically reduced my anxiety that I think would really help you as well. And there are things that I really wish I knew earlier in life because they would have totally changed, I think, everything for me, including the quality of my life primarily. So at one point, I was super stressed out. I couldn't sleep. I actually started losing my hair at one point, and I gained a ton of weight. I gained like 40 pounds. I was like losing my mind, stressed about money, stressed about everything, right? I was rolling around, kind of sweaty at night, just worrying about different things. And so what this did was it really caused me to go on this deep dive into what causes anxiety, how can I treat it, how can I get better. And I just read a ton of books. I saw many doctors. I did all these different things. And what I found was some pretty interesting information that might not be common for most people to know. And so what I'm going to do is just walk you through the things that I did, which really helped me kind of get my anxiety under control. And now I feel like the quality of my life is way better. And I think this could really help you guys as well. So the first thing that I did was I noticed the effect of caffeine on my stress level. It's funny, I used to work in the nightclub industry, and I found that a lot of people tend to be really stressed out and anxious, and the lifestyle there was, you kind of drink all night, you party, you drink a ton of caffeine in the morning. A lot of people got into, drugs at night, and, then the diet was off. I noticed a lot of people weren't eating, the right kinds of foods and things like that. And, it's kind of like the perfect storm, like the lack of sleep, the caffeine, drugs, alcohol, all that stuff. It's like the perfect storm for anxiety, right? And, I quickly kind of got out of that and managed to manage, my anxiety a lot better through a bunch of different things. But I noticed, hanging out with a lot of people in the club industry, that was kind of just like the norm. That's what everybody did. And, and I did as well. And to be honest, there was a lot of awesome parts about that industry, which I really liked, the music and the partying and hanging out with people, which was awesome. But what I found is that that lifestyle also created like a lot of anxiety because of all these things, right? So, and then on the flip side, I started hanging out with a lot of very successful entrepreneurs. And the difference that I noticed between the two kind of groups of people is that the very successful people tended to manage their anxiety much better. Like they were very actively trying to manage their anxiety through all these different things I'm going to talk about. And I think that really is like a key factor in setting you up for being successful and just having a higher quality of life, is being able to manage the anxiety. And in order to kind of like achieve a lot of different things, say you want to level up your career, or you want to be more athletic, or you want to do different things, I think a lot of it really honestly boils down to how well you manage your stress and your anxiety and in leveling up, so you can handle these bigger pressures. Because like you look at, for example, I've, hanging out with this guy who is making, I don't even know, like $10-20 million a year. And one thing I noticed is his schedule was like insanely dialed in, right? The workouts, the nutrition, everything was like crazy dialed in. And then that allowed him to better manage these crazy stresses that you would have in a big business like that, right? Like, hey, we lost $1 million this month, or this whole team quit, or like all these different things that can happen when you're running a big business. And, versus like the party lifestyle where trying to do something like that when you're really stressed out is just, you're going to have a heart attack, right? It's not going to work well for you. So those are kind of like the two flip sides of lifestyle. And so what the big factors were for me in managing anxiety were, one, getting control of your caffeine consumption. So what I noticed was, even just like for me, I was like really sensitive to caffeine. So even just having one really strong cup of coffee in the morning would make me stressed and anxious, and I wouldn't sleep, and that would just be this vicious cycle of, oh well, maybe I should have more caffeine, and then to stay awake because I was so tired from not sleeping, and it just creates this vicious cycle. If you throw in alcohol into that, it's like way worse. So step one for me was just dialing back the caffeine, cutting it out altogether at first, and then slowly integrating it at much smaller doses so it didn't actually stress me out as much. 2 was the sleep. So really getting your sleep dialed in is super key in managing your stress and anxiety. So for sleep, what I would do is, a lot of different things, honestly. That's a whole different video, but like some of the key ones are, so alcohol, caffeine, not really having much or any of that, having blackout blinds, so it's super dark, having your room cold, going to bed at a consistent time. There's a whole bunch of different things that you can look up around sleep that are dramatically going to impact. I think that's one of the biggest impacts on your quality of life and anxiety is dialing in your sleep so you get 8 or 9 hours, every night or most nights, and you're going to feel just like a million times better during the day. So 1, caffeine, 2, sleep, 3, working out, and particularly when it comes to working out, I think doing cardiovascular exercise, and a lot of this is, there's tons of science behind this stuff as well. Like I'm not just like rambling off. It worked for me, but I read a lot of scientific studies that prove this stuff works. So working out regularly, especially doing cardiovascular exercise, even every day, like when I'm really stressed out, I actually work out and do cardio every single day to lower my stress level. So if it's a stressful time in business, I will do that. And that it's almost, it's like, I think it was Tony Robbins who said, calm your body, calm your mind. So if you are like, I used to go ride my bike, for example, for like 3 or 4 hours. You don't even need to do that. I bet 30 minutes to an hour is more than enough. But if you go do pretty intense cardio for 30 minutes to an hour, have a nice shower after, it's going to be hard to be stressed out after that because your body is just like, it's done, right? Your nerves are relaxed. You feel way better. So 1, caffeine, 2, sleep. 3, you're working on the cardio. You're doing that regularly, potentially every day or at least a few times a week. I work out pretty much every day. 4 is getting your diet dialed in. So getting the right macros is something almost everybody screws up. And by macros, I mean protein, carbohydrates, and fats, having the right ratio and the right amount of calories. Precision Nutrition has some really awesome information on this where it shows you like what should be on your every plate that you eat. But I would definitely recommend checking that out. And I can put the link below to that. And once you have that dialed in, most people don't eat nearly enough protein, which is wild. You're supposed to eat an insane amount. It's like 1 pound per pound of body weight or 1 gram per pound of body weight or something. So I weigh 200 pounds. So I'm supposed to eat roughly 200 grams of protein a day, which is an insane amount. It almost seems impossible. But when you start working up to it and figuring it out, you'll feel so much better because you get less like ups and downs in your blood sugar. It won't crash nearly as much. Whereas like if most people, they eat way too many carbohydrates and sugars, and then their blood sugar's up and down, and it causes a lot of stress. Whereas if you're eating the right thing, you're kind of like more level, right? You feel way better. So 4 is getting your macros like really dialed in, getting your nutrition really dialed in. 5, as I mentioned already, actually limiting alcohol and drug use. I've noticed, I have a sleep tracker on here. Even just 1 drink, even if it's a few hours before I go to bed, 1 drink will dramatically impact my sleep. So it'll screw my sleep right up. And now I'm not saying you need to be like a crazy person about this. Like I think you should still go out and party every once in a while, have fun. Like I just went on a bender, for 3 days at a bachelor party, and it was awesome. But I did notice, like as soon as I got back, I was like, wow, my anxiety is through the roof. My stress is through the roof. I'm exhausted. I don't have energy. And it was worth it for me, right? Like every once in a while, I feel like it's worth it. But if you're doing it all the time, I feel like it's going to take a massive toll on your quality of life, and you're not going to feel as good. So limiting the drugs and alcohol to kind of like special occasions, not doing it all the time. Another thing that I noticed helped a lot when I started hanging out with some extremely wealthy people, and they were young guys too. Like they were all going to therapy, and I was like, what? I couldn't believe it. I was like, I thought only like, you're a wuss if you go to therapy, man. Like don't be a big baby. But then what I realized is these guys like were so much better at managing stress than I was. And I was like, man, clearly they're doing well. They're making millions of dollars. They're in their 20s and they all go to therapy. Like, it blew my mind, right? And so I just found out who they were going to. I went to the same person. And, for me at the time, I was really stressed about relationship stuff. And I found that like just getting more information about how to have a good, healthy relationship, shocking, it made the relationship better. And I felt better and I felt way less stressed out. And I would go even once a week at one point for a while. So if you can go to therapy, that's awesome. If you can't afford it, there are some free options, I think, as well, especially in Canada. And so, so working through that kind of like mental stuff can have a massive impact on lowering your stress and anxiety. And that can, your quality of life can go way up by just, if you're constantly stressing about things. I would definitely recommend going into therapy. I've heard meditation, and I think there's a lot of studies around this too. Meditation can work really well as well on kind of like calming your mind, getting rid of all those negative thoughts. Honestly, I can't stand it. I've tried it so many times and I get bored out of my freaking mind, probably because I'm partially like, I'm on the spectrum of autism, my guess is somewhere on that spectrum. So I just like have ADD. Like I can't just sit and do nothing. It drives me nuts, but it works really well for some people. And so that's great. For me, it's more like the exercise. I find that's more meditative for me. And the final thing, this is the thing when I got super stressed out and I got crazy anxious and I was losing my hair and gained like 40 pounds and all this like terrible stuff. I was just miserable. I found out it was actually an imbalance in my hormones. So if your hormones are imbalanced, your body's not getting like the right amount of hormones that it needs, you're going to be freaking miserable, man. It'll screw up every aspect of your life pretty much. And it did for me. So if you've done all these other things, like you've cut out caffeine, you sleep really good, you're doing the workouts, you're doing all this stuff, you're limiting alcohol, drug use, everything, you're going to therapy, and still you're not, you're still like you're super stressed out, I would definitely recommend getting your hormones checked. I had to go through a company in the US. I can drop the name below. I forget exactly what the name was, but because in Canada it's actually quite difficult to get like a full blood panel done, and what that does is it tests your thyroid hormone, which for me was like totally messed up. So my thyroid, which is like what produces energy in your body, it just stopped working. So I basically had a non-working organ in my body, which obviously would create lots of problems, right? So, or it could be like a food allergy, which I've also had. So getting all that stuff tested, and they're way better in the States, as I mentioned, can have a dramatic impact on, your quality of your life and your anxiety. And so I would, if you've done all these other things, I would highly recommend doing that as well. And yeah, so like the reality is when I talk to people, quite often I find, they're complaining about stress and anxiety, and what doctors will do, which drives me freaking nuts, is they will, and they did this to me, which was crazy. So when I went to the doctor and I saw them, they didn't ask me about anything, caffeine, sleep, workout. They didn't ask me a single question about any of that stuff. They just said, hey, why don't you take this magic pill that's going to solve all your problems, and you're going to sleep better, and you're not going to be anxious, and you're not going to, feel stressed out all the time, and it's not going to mess with anything, and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, this is insane, man. Like, you haven't asked me a single thing about what I eat, how I sleep, if I am an alcoholic. For all you know, I could be like shooting drugs every night. Like, it's just crazy, our medical system. And I feel like everybody's doing this. They're like jumping on this pill. So they put me on this like antidepressant. I was like, dude, I'm not even depressed. Like, why the heck are you putting me on an antidepressant? He's like, well, you're not sleeping, so it'll help with that. So whatever. I took the pill for a while there, and honestly, it made everything worse. I had crazy brain fog, all these different issues. And I went back to the doctor and I said, hey man, like this, I slept better, but I feel like a zombie. My brain feels turned off. I'm tired all the time of this brain fog. And he's like, oh, well, yeah, it does have some side effects, like you can have like erectile dysfunction. And right away I was like, see you later. Chuck this pill out. Like, I'm not going to take this crap, man. Like, and so the reality is it wasn't, I didn't need to take a pill. I needed to figure out all this other stuff first. And then I was fine. Like, everybody has anxiety. That's the reality of it. and it's just how well you manage it. If you're doing all these different things, I think you're going to be far better off. And the only other thing I would probably add to that helps me a lot is like the cold plunge and sauna. If you do that, it's kind of like you've worked out, but you didn't work out. It can feel really good and you feel really relaxed ever. And that also can be something that can dramatically lower your stress and anxiety. So I really hope this video helped you. If it did and you found something useful in here, please do subscribe to the channel and comment below. Let me know what helped you with managing your anxiety.